I was in third grade, sitting in a classroom when our teacher announced that President John Kennedy had been assassinated. I clearly remember that day. I didn't understand all that was going on, but I knew it was a day of trauma for our country. Later, when I was a teenager, I sat one night, late at night, with my mom and dad around an old black and white television with a fuzzy picture and watched Neil Armstrong take his first steps on the moon. It was a day of tremendous celebration around the world. There are people in our congregation that are old enough, they remember the day of infamy when Pearl Harbor was attacked. There are some that remember D-Day in Europe. But for this generation, the memory that's indelibly printed upon our minds is that of 9/11 in 2001. It was a terrible attack. If you were a child at that time or an adult, you remember exactly where you were when you heard that news. My wife Ginger and I were taking our son Andrew to Job's clinic in Los Angeles. He had broken a vertebrae in his neck playing football, and we wanted to see what, if anything, could be done. As we approached the clinic, which was very near LAX, we received a phone call that a plane had flown into one of the World Trade Towers. At that point, with the first plane, most of the pundits were thinking this was a tragic accident of some kind. We went into the clinic and sat in the lobby waiting for our turn to see the doctor, and we were watching the images coming out of New York. And everyone was just quiet. And then we watched as the second plane hit the second tower. And as I looked around the room, I could see it was dawning on everyone at the same time that this was not an accident, that this was an attack upon our country. In the days ahead, there was a fear that settled over our country. There was also a time of grief. There was a time of gratitude mixed with grief concerning the first responders who had rushed in that building, losing their lives. But in the immediate aftermath of that, LAX was evacuated. They thought there might be an attack on the airport, and we were close enough to the airport that we were evacuated as well. We began to make our way back to Bakersfield, and I started receiving calls and told people, we'll open the church tonight, the building, to have a time of prayer. I remember walking from my office to the sanctuary, and I was amazed. There were over 1,000 people there gathered for prayer. They intuitively came to the church building for a sense of hope and comfort and community. I preached a spontaneous message from one of the Psalms. I'd never preached from that Psalm before. I don't think I have since. Psalm 46. It's a Psalm that Martin Luther was inspired by to write the great hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of need. The next week was a week of grief. It was a week of a lot of political talk because we knew that we were going to go to war with someone. I was grieved by that because I knew there were young men in our church that I someday would do their funeral because of that event, which I did. The next Sunday, our church building was absolutely packed in all of its services. And it wasn't just Valley. Virtually every church building across the country was packed as people were turning to God in such a time of uncertainty and a time now of impending war. And then a few weeks went by and things went back to normal. It was a new normal. Anyone that's traveled in an airport since then knows it's a new normal with security. But soon the church buildings were empty, or at least they returned to their former attendance. And I was deeply grieved as a pastor. I was grieved over the loss of life in New York, in the Pentagon. I was grieved for those brave men that rushed into the building. Their life was sacrificed. I was grieved for those families. I was grieved for the many young men that were joining the military, knowing that some of them would die on foreign fields. But I was especially grieved that there was a moment when people were drawn to God. And it's not that God did this. This was an act of evil men. But God, in His grace, allowed for a moment for people to be drawn close to Him and to His grace. And so as we remember this 20 years, remember and pray for the families of those that loss still stings. Pray for first responders that are still alive but are suffering in their health. Pray for the many, many families that have buried brave young men and brave young women because of the wars that event spawned. Remember all of that, but also remember this. God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in time of need.